Holy Jesus fucking Christ. What's up guys, it's me Zero my Kitsune, and today I just want to talk about my initial first impressions of Mass Effect Andromeda's single player. Now before I start going into this, I want to really do a thank you to my Patreon supporters. And normally I wouldn't say this, but the reason why I actually went ahead and got the EA access, I don't normally believe in those sort of subscription services and pre-orders and all that such, but since I knew it's a small amount of money, but even then I was gonna get reimbursed through my Patreon for it, I just went ahead and did it so I'd be able to get that review done that much faster. So again, thank you to them. And going forward, okay. So my thoughts on the single player of Mass Effect so far. Now I only have 4 hours out of the 10 hours that the trial is going for. But I want to spend the other half, the other 5 hours, so I got 1 left, the other 5 hours in the multiplayer. But so far in the single player, my fears on the combat at the very least have been put to rest. Everything else, I don't know, man. The character creation was garbage, complete garbage. It was missing key functions. You couldn't change the shape of your eyes, you couldn't change the style of your eyebrows, you could not change the skeletal setup of your face at all. So initial character customization was kinda out the window. I gave up halfway through. The default character you see in all the promotional materials, you can't make that inside of the character creation engine. You either have that, some would say high quality, some would say not high quality, or you have whatever mess you make inside the character creation engine. And that, to me, that actually throws out some of the arguments that, oh, the studio created, you know, the default characters, or at least a female one, inside the character creation engine, so you could, you know, do your things and change it. No, you can't. The default is separate from what you can actually make. But I'm stalling on that for too long. You could also, you know, edit your sister, but I didn't even bother with that after the disappointment of the initial character creation. And it also asks you questions about what Shepard you had in the original trilogy. I don't know how that would even play in to Mass Effect Andromeda, as Shepard, I don't even think he's mentioned in the game at all, so don't even know on that one. Moving on, the actual story and the visuals, I can't say if the writing is gonna be good or bad with only 4 hours in, but what I can say is so far it was okay at best. They try to force emotions on you when there's really no emotion to show. The first planet you go to, they try to make it this big bombastic event, and at least the way I saw it, I was like, I'm just getting into the game. This is not amazing to me. If they had started the game on Earth and maybe built it up a little bit more, then it could have been amazing. But they flubbed that. Another thing they flubbed was the relationship between your sister and your dad. These characters, I don't know, so how they expect me to get emotionally invested in them, especially when, spoiler not spoiler, the dad dies, and that's the only reason why you're the stupid Pathfinder in the first place. There's just no emotion in it, because I had known the dad for roughly 20 minutes. So it rushed all that out, and I don't know why they thought that was a good idea. From the dialogue, there is no Paragon or Renegade, but I had already basically assumed that. There's a Krogan on there, well, there are a couple of Krogans in the game, and they've skillfully dodged the genophage issue. Because in the original Mass Effect trilogy, there was talks about the Krogan starting to adapt to the initial genophage, and that's why in Mass Effect 2 you have to upgrade it. So in this one, since it's before the Mass Effect trilogy, the 500 years of sleep and all that such, they're starting to grow immune to it. So they just completely dodged the whole genophage issue. It's probably not going to get brought up. From a graphical standpoint, the cartoony graphics, what you've seen in the Twitter pages, yeah, it's true. They really do look like that, and it's kind of sad. But I'm a person who likes cartoony graphics, so Even though it settles on the uncanny valley, only sometimes do I actually get creeped out by it. And as far as the movement gifs that you might be seeing on Twitter, I'm not too annoyed by it, if only because it's that stupid realistic movement that three-dimensional games do. They have this weight to all your movements so you can't turn on a dime like in more cartoony video games. So that's the part that annoys me, the actual movement. The animations, man, I don't even pay attention to them half the time. But there's one last thing I want to go over when it comes to story and visuals, is the frame rate. If you have bought Mass Effect Andromeda, expect seeing your game and your rig sitting at the recommended specs, be warned. That recommended specs are for 30 frames 1080p. So don't expect to get full 60 on your PC rig if you just hit the recommended settings. You're gonna have to lower them in order to get a smooth 60 frames per second experience. I think that's sneaky and deceptive because 60 FPS is kind of what you expect on PC, but if you're a console player who's okay with playing at 30, it won't bother you. But I'm sure that some PC players are going to be really annoyed by that. Finally, talking about the gameplay, and at first I said I'm not disappointed by the gameplay. I am not disappointed by the gameplay at all. The first stage was weird. The first planet you go to, it's weird. I felt clunky and I didn't like it at all. I didn't even like the exploration portions. But slowly but surely, I got used to it, and the exploration became fun. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Mass Effect 1, where you had these large planets you could land on and do different events. So people who called back for that in Mass Effect 2 and 3, well, Andromeda's kinda got you covered. They're large landscapes, and with the ability to jump with the jump pack, you got three-dimensional landings. You can be on roofs. I actually jumped up on top of the Normandy equivalent, the Tempest, that's what it's called. I barely remember its name because it's forgettable. But there's also item pickups, so that's another thing that was kind of sort of in Mass Effect 1, but dropped away as they started cutting away at the RPG mechanics of the Mass Effect series. So there are a few more RPG mechanics. Whether or not you can actually role play as well as the other Mass Effects, who knows. But there are RPG mechanics. Speaking of mechanics, there's also a crafting system. Every game nowadays has to have some sort of crafting system, and I don't know. I made a single shotgun that I didn't really end up using. I think I switched away from it when I realized, wow, I'm not leveled up high enough to be able to tank enemies and shoot them in the face. But the crafting system's there. If you like crafting, you got crafting. But the combat in general, it actually does feel like an improvement to the Mass Effect trilogy. When I talked about there not being cover from me just looking at the footage, that was wrong. There is this sort of dynamic cover system where your character does hunker down, you just don't stick to cover. But it's done well enough that when you run up against something, it's not like other games that try to do some sort of dynamic cover system where you just kind of stand next to it and you're still getting hit. You actually hunker down. So I'm really glad at that. There's a lot more movement in it, but there's still the tactics and positioning of Mass Effect. You can still tell your squad mates to go X, Y, Z and position them in a way that they don't get shot to hell and back. So I'm glad at that. One thing I don't like though is that Sentinels in particular, if you were a Sentinel in the Mass Effect trilogy, your beautiful tech armor is now a passive ability. And Sentinel's not even an option in character creation, so that's disappointing as all hell as a Sentinel player. The last thing for gameplay is that the squad mates. This game's gonna provide you with, from what I've seen so far, when I looked at that squad mate menu, it showed darkened out people, so I assume that's all the squad mates. There were only 6 of them. Mass Effect 2 made me expect larger amounts of squad mates from the subsequent Mass Effect games, but I guess that's never happening. We're never gonna get a roster of squad mates quite like Mass Effect 2. So that's a shame, and especially since people have seen what some of the squad mates are like, and I'm kind of with them in saying I don't know about these squad mates, none of them really feel me, but maybe they'll grow on me as I play the game. The other part about squad mates though is, from what I've seen, there's no way to customize them. You can't change their outfits, and more importantly, you can't change their weapons. Either you can't at all, or I just couldn't find it in the 4 hours I played. It could be there and I didn't find it. That's a true possibility, but my experiences say you can't customize these squad mates at all, except for, you know, their level ups and abilities. So there's that. All in all, it feels like this is, you know, another case of the open world infection. All games have to be open world, and we just got an open world game, you know, Zelda Breath of the Wild. And there are some tweets saying, you know, Breath of the Wild is so good, Mass Effect Andromeda feels like a downgrade, and that's what you get when you're playing around in a crowded genre nowadays. So, what I'm gonna be saying every time I reference Mass Effect, and what I have been saying, is not your daddy's Mass Effect, and it still holds true, but it's now slightly better. It's not your daddy's Mass Effect because it has better combat, but also potentially a worse story. But that's all I gotta say about Mass Effect Andromeda. Leave in the comment section what you think about the game so far. I know a lot of people are playing it, and a lot of people are streaming it. I'm gonna go try out the multiplayer for a couple hours, and I'll be back with a video on that maybe tomorrow or the day after. See you next time.